All right, everybody, welcome to this month's edition of the Business Hot Seat, which has been our most incredible call that we've had month after month. Really, we've only been able to interview 7 and 8 figure business owners, entrepreneurs, but actually just leaders, not people that lucked into this, people that are leaders, great at their job, good human beings that have, good advice. And one of our pillars is production. One of the things that we want to do as men is not just take care of ourselves, take care of our families, but produce and teach how to produce. We're incredibly lucky that we've got some contacts. We got Jacob Baadsgaard here, who $150 million business started as a side hustle. I don't want to steal any of your thunder. Cory has kind of told me some of the mistakes that you have made that actually made this thing blow up. It's some incredible stories. If we get into that, we can get into that. But since Cory is the man that knows you, and you guys have worked together for a while, I'm going to turn this one over to Cory. He's gonna run this hot seat, and I might jump in occasionally. And just pumped to have you here, Jake. So Cory, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. Good intro, Clint. So what we're trying to accomplish on these business hot seats is bring in really, really high level performers, right? People who have built something significant, led with a lot of integrity, and just kind of have experience in leveling up in their life. And so I'm really excited to have Jake on this call because he's someone that has done exactly that. And so, as Clint mentioned, he's the founder of Disruptive Advertising, which is one of the top-rated performance marketing agencies in the country. He started it in 2012, and since then, it's just become a powerhouse in the digital marketing space. And so, he's really been someone that's been a visionary in the business, and he's always led with a lot of generosity, and he's always led with a lot of gratitude, and it's built something that's been really, really unique. And so he's also someone that has started to build another company, like a sister business called Disruptive University. He's a host of a podcast. He's writing a book trilogy right now. And not to mention, he's ran probably, what, a dozen marathons, Jake, somewhere around there.
Something like that.
And not only does he run marathons, but he's qualified for the Boston Marathon. And so not only is he putting in the miles, but he's doing it at a really, really high level. And so Jake's just really someone that's walked the path of growth his entire life, not professionally, but personally as well. And he's been a huge mentor to me. And I'm just very, very excited to have him on this call. And so with that, Jake, I'll turn the time over to you and let you just spew some knowledge all over us.
I love spewing on people. It's like my favorite thing. And then Cory and Clint, it's always fun for me. If you guys have curiosity or question, just ask them, because I think it kind of makes it feel more like a dialogue and conversation rather than me just talking at everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. So, it's kind of interesting where to start. I'm actually one of 10 children. And so I was number 6. And I would say I've been fairly entrepreneurial. I mean, I figured out how to get a job when I was 8 years old because we didn't have enough money to ever buy me anything I wanted. My needs are always met, but my wants, I had to figure out at a very early age. And so I've had a job since I was 8 and been wheeling and dealing and figuring out things entrepreneurial since then. One of the experiences that I feel like in life, we kind of go through these different phases. And I would just say early in my career, I graduated from BYU. I've always been a little bit more of a marketing and sales are my natural skill set, but I actually got a technical degree in information systems at BYU. And went to work at the hot company of the time called Omniture. And Omniture was later bought by Adobe. But while I was there, what I did was I helped company make sure that they were collecting all of the correct information for their digital marketing and married that data to their customer data to see what marketing was actually producing revenue and profitability for the business. And I'm just such a big advocate of earlier in the career, it's really important to just get really good at something. Everyone's always, what's the right thing to get good at? I'm like, honestly, I don't even really care what you get good at. Just get really good at something. Because the better you get at that, you start to see all the pieces that play into that as well. And so I was there the first few years of my career doing consulting and helping businesses get the right data to make great marketing decisions. And when I was working with American Express and John Deere and Home Depot and all these Fortune 100 companies and they didn't know how to do this. And I thought, God, what do small and medium-sized businesses do that can't spend millions of dollars in consulting and software to solve this? And I thought, God, I'm interested in exploring and doing my own thing, and I think everyone is to some degree. But I didn't know quite when or how to do that until after a really high performance year in my department, I was the top performer as it relates to billable hours and overall performance and client renewals and repeat and revenue generated in my business unit. And my manager sat me down and was so excited to tell me that he got me one of the biggest raises in the department for 8%. And it was in that moment, and I'll never forget it, where it was so clear to me that staying on that corporate journey, I wasn't resentful, I wasn't angry. It was just very, very clear to me that the growth I was looking for was no longer available there. And staying in a job to maybe get into middle management at some point in the coming years, I'm like, like I've kind of peaked, I've grown as fast as I can grow here, and this is no longer the right place for me. And what I see a lot of—
Can I ask on that real quick?
Please.
So just, you kind of said you kind of had this realization that you were going to have to move on. Was it salary driven? Was it potential driven? What was it that made you realize I'm probably a bigger fish than this pond?
Yeah. I would say it's somewhat all of the above.
Mm-hmm.
Is I just love adventure, I love learning, I love growing, and I like doing it at my pace. And I had been learning and growing so fast for about 4 years in that role. Wide-eyed and bushy-tailed coming out of college, but the growth trajectory started to plateau. And that is what I was learning and growing personally, professionally, and financially in the role. And I'm like, okay. And then when I looked forward, I'm like, yeah, sometimes there are plateaus, but do I see another path forward that grows at the rate that I'm interested in? And the answer was no, I'm actually just not. And I feel like we all get tempted to like blame it on the company in these moments. Oh, the company or my boss isn't giving me enough opportunity. It's like, it's actually the individual's responsibility to figure out, like, it needs to be mutual. The company needs to compensate and provide the right environment for growth. But then a lot of the times we just run into those moments where it's like, it's run its course. If I stay and I'm unhappy, that's on me now.
Well said. Well,
Yeah.
and a dangerous mindset for a lot of men that are almost handcuffed to a situation that they didn't expect to be in, but they're comfortable.
Yeah. Yes. And that's where I had a good salary, I had good stock options. I was really good at my job. People liked me. And so it's not like it was easy to just walk away from all of that. But I will tell you, it was clear. It was clear that it was time to make that move. And most suffering, in my experience, comes from once you have clarity, and then you spend a lot of time in your head trying to decide if it was really clear, or if you should really do something about it. And so that was kind of like that first professional moment. But I had a non-compete for a year for any enterprise customers. And then, but I thought, and I still need an income. I still have a family that I need to take care of. And so I thought, well, what I'll do is do some freelance for small to medium-sized businesses on the side that are non-competitive. And then took a job at a public company being their director of digital marketing. And it was actually a former client of mine. And I just said, hey, I plan to start my own business. I'm going to do some on the side. I'm a big believer in being transparent. If I have to hide it, then it doesn't feel like I should need to. That might not be the right job for me. And he said, I'd love to have you here as long as you want to be here. And when you're ready to branch off on your own, maybe I'll just become a client at that point, because we had developed a really good relationship. And so I did that for about a year, and that was in 2012. And I built a side book of business of doing freelance work for other businesses, had a successful wholesaling business. Funny enough, of Adobe software where I was able to
A
get
quick
it.
question. So I'm looking for like
Yeah.
the Kiwi waterproof spray for clothing and
Oh,
stuff. I don't know if it's
someone's not muted.
often here next to shoes, but I don't know if there's.
There we go. I was like, oh, we got a question. Oh, not for me. Yeah. And so anyway, that's where at that point had a good situation, got some side business going, had a little side hustle that went really well with wholesaling software that got some decent, like a windfall of cash that probably accelerated my entrepreneurial journey 3 or 4 years. Had a book of business that I got to about 20 to 30 grand a month. And that's when I said, okay, it's time for me to make that full transition. And that was in September of 2013 when I no longer had an employer or benefits or those types of things as well. And it was, yeah, that was the bridge. And it wasn't too long after, and we won't have to get into too much detail, that Cory came and joined me and helped me grow and scale that business for 9.5 years. We got to work together. But you guys, on that journey, it was kind of like it became my new obsession, because I love learning, growth, and development, and business was now running a business was now that new energy, like the energy giver to me in life. And I loved it. It was like I was on my adventure. I was learning, I was growing, I was stressed out of my mind. I assumed it was going to not work all the time. For 3 years, I asked myself, why am I doing this? I could be making, because I wasn't paying myself much, if anything, the first 3 years, dealing with initial partners and buying them out when it didn't work out. And for 3 years, I wondered, why am I doing this? I'm working harder to make less money to start my business. And most people just see people when they're successful 10 years later and assumed it was just easy for them. And for 3 years, almost every day, I asked myself, why am I still doing this? Like the demons, the doubts, all of those types of things. And then it started to come together where all of a sudden cash flow was in a good spot. The business was growing. It was more sustainable. And I remember, and Cory was there with me, we celebrated hitting our 10 million in annual revenue. We celebrated by getting everybody a tux and gown and went and had an awesome event at Sundance to celebrate. But what business had become for me at that point was I was so enthralled with that all of the other areas of my life were suffering, actually pretty bad. And I was about 50 pounds heavier than you see me now. It was pretty emotionally volatile, where I was just very reactive to stressful situations. Not always visible to everyone else, sometimes visible to everyone else. Did not like my body, did not like, I was in a marriage that wasn't working anymore. And we're like, if it stays this way, we probably will end up getting a divorce. I felt pretty hollow in any sort of spiritual connection, from like, and I think I see spirituality as different than religion. I think religion is one way to practice spirituality, but I don't think that it is spirituality. And I'm just kind of just suffering on the inside. I'm like, what the hell? I thought, I've started this business. I've got 3 kids. We've built the bigger house. I've got the nice cars. I've got a business that's doing $10 million in business. And yet here I am, overweight, stressed out, thinking about divorce. And I didn't think that this was what would be the case. I thought that this is when I'd be happy. And so, a short story long, we ended up in marriage counseling with my wife and I think counseling can be helpful if you actually want to be helped. The challenge with advice is when people need it the most, they're not in a place to receive it. And when they're in a place to receive it, they don't need it, because we all kind of already know what's going on. We just don't want to admit it to ourselves. But I had a really powerful marriage counseling session where he was asking me about the business, and I was really eager to beat my chest and tell him how awesome it was, AKA how awesome I am. See, she's the problem, not me. Or how would the business be doing so well? So if we can just, like that was my attitude in marriage counseling. And he said, I'm happy to hear how well the business is going. How does your business partner feel about that? And I said, what do you mean I don't have a business partner? And he said, oh, interesting that you see it that way. And he looked at my wife and then he looked back at me. And I thought, yeah, dude, she's not my business partner. And all of a sudden, that's when I had like that realization of, and shit, I don't even see her like a partner. Okay. And then I just get consumed with this. It's almost like an out of body experience where I'm just consumed with this. What would it be like to be married to someone for 10 years, have 3 children with them, support his ambitions, and then he doesn't see and treat you like a partner?
Hmm.
And I'm like, I'm that guy. I'm that guy. I don't treat my wife like an equal. I don't treat her like a partner. And what that would fucking blow to be married to someone that treated you like that. And it wasn't that way all the time. You know what I mean? But enough that that's why we were there. And so I thought,
What are you thinking at that time? What are you thinking right at that time? If you can crawl back into that moment where you come to the realization that all your eggs are in one business basket through the grind, through the hustle, everything like that, and you get this news from the counselor, what are you thinking right then?
in that moment, if I felt naked, I felt totally exposed. What I had been hiding behind was no longer there.
Wow.
That's
Wow.
what it felt like. Yeah.
Yeah, just I mean, it seems like just a complete out of balance. You had mentioned spirituality. We talk about the body, we talk about the business, we talk about your family, and we talk about your being. Um, Although sometimes we leverage the confidence from these aspects that we're doing so well in to think it's going to make up for the other things that we're missing. And as long as I'm overly confident in my business,
Mhm.
nobody will know, and I can hide from it as well.
Yep.
So
Yeah, we all have that thing that we lean on.
yeah,
I'll tell you. So in that moment, after feeling naked and afraid and alone, I'm like, I'm exposed. Well, I guess it's time to do something about it. And I feel like those are the moments where you reach the limits of where the mind and body can take you. And you have to lean back into something deeper inside of yourself that's not your mind and it's not your body. And to trust this new path forward that I didn't even know what it meant. But I did know one thing. This is no longer about trying to fix my wife. I need to start focusing on me because I've got some shit I need to deal with. And so that's where I'm like, okay, I'm actually gonna work on that. And
hindsight being what it is,
yeah.
probably a positive experience for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, one of the most beautiful experiences of my life.
Yeah.
And one of the most painful experiences of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I went and did 8 months of therapy, work with a therapist. And 6 of those months, most sessions were me trying to convince him that at least I'm not as bad as the other people you talk to, right? And I'm like, bless that man's heart, because I just always had my defaults. When I didn't like myself, I would default to the same patterns my whole life that I felt guilty about. Binging on food or my phone or porn or whatever that was that just reinforced the narrative of, see, I kind of suck. And I just fall back into these things. And then let me go lean on the thing that I am successful with and pretend like it's not an issue and kind of blame everyone else when my life isn't the way I want it to. So I kind of just had to start confronting those things. And I will tell you that this created a big breakthrough for me personally and my business and my family, because on the other side of working through that fear, I now have a 5.5-year-old boy that he's our 4th kid. He's not here if I didn't work through that with my wife. We work together almost every day now on projects that we are deeply passionate about together and support each other in the areas we're not interested in working together on. Whether that be with our fitness or spirituality or those, like, there's some things that we love doing together and some things that we don't, but it's like, she's my partner 100%. And I realize that it doesn't always work out that way. There's not always the fairy tale ending, but I'm really grateful that the truth was exposed and that I finally got to just work through that fear. And the fear was, well, if I can blame her, then I don't have to change. And if it's her fault, well, why don't I want to change? Because I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can.
What level of success in the business have you found since that mind shift? now that your wife is the partner in the business, in the spirit, in everything, have you found more success in business or less success?
Yeah, I think it depends how you define success, but regardless of how you define it, there's more.
Is a
Yeah,
correlation with everything at home?
absolutely. Yeah. But here's the thing that I would say, because I have a variety of friends that are billionaires, that had a lot of success after things got worse and worse and just
Mhm.
compensated more and more. And so I don't, that's where I say, like, depending on what you define as success, I know people that haven't worked through those challenges and have a lot more zeros in their bank account because they kept trying to compensate, at the continued expense of all those other things as well. And so what I would say, Clint, is, I'm a lot more fulfilled.
Oh, well said.
Um,
Well said.
I'm a lot more fulfilled, and we make more money, and there's more revenue, and there's a lot of these other things as well. But that's not the thing that makes me feel fulfilled in isolation anymore.
Hey, can I pop
Yeah,
in for a question real quick? Is that all right, Clint,
sure.
Jacob? Hey, so as someone that got married pretty young myself, but having a lot of ambitions, my number one concern has always been making sure you're taking care of your obligations, right? Like making sure your family's taken care of, making sure everybody's happy, making sure you're showing up as a husband, as a father, going to games, making sure you're, as Clint says, keeping your bucket filled with everybody in your family. And I feel like, I mean, obviously that's a worthwhile goal, but I also feel like it conflicts a little bit with the amount of maybe time or even almost selfishness required to really give a business, where it's like, it requires your time. It requires everybody understanding that it's going to be, it's going to be tough potentially. Um, I feel like there's a little bit of maybe that prior you where you were having all these other issues,
Mhm.
but it made you a better businessman, salesman, right? Like, and I certainly don't want to trade anything for that, but given the perspective you have now, how would you have, I guess, dialed in to the same success with your newfound knowledge of, or maybe newfound priorities? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Thanks,
And
Dylan.
maybe
I mean,
there's
that's
no
a great
formula for
question.
that, right? But it's,
Yeah.
that's my biggest struggle, is thinking like,
So
how can I take risks or whatever and not compromise the
if
good
I'm going
things
to
I have?
paraphrase that question, it
Yeah.
is knowing what you know now. If you were to burn it all down, what you know about yourself, taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, taking care of your spirituality, what would you have done different to build this business?
Yeah, I'll just kind of address the question, and I don't know if it'll answer it the way anyone's hoping for. I would change nothing.
Hmm.
I love that version of Jake that was doing the best that he knew how to do. And I wouldn't change anything. And this is, I'm a big believer that authenticity wins. And that the path to authenticity is awareness, honesty, and responsibility. And in that moment, when I became very aware of how I was showing up in my relationship, the temptation of my mind to lure me back into all of those behaviors that would reinforce the narrative that there was actually something wrong with me. Um, it wasn't so I'm tempted to judge that I did it wrong. And I've actually spent a lot of time judging my past that I did it wrong. But that doesn't lead me forward. Um, the only thing that awareness does, that moment of like, I'm that guy that's showing up this way in my relationship. I couldn't know that if I hadn't done it. So I'm grateful for that experience. The only thing it's telling me is it would be inauthentic and contrary to my values to keep showing up that way moving forward. That's all that life teaches us, is what is authentic moving forward,
Hmm.
because you can't change the past. And so when I go back to those moments, I wouldn't have changed anything. I think getting out of balance to pursue some professional success was clearly what I wanted to experience at that point in my life. I don't think that means I did it wrong. And I think that that's where a lot of gurus and people that have been there, they're like, yeah, if I could do it perfectly and have no life experience and everything just goes wonderfully, here's how I'd do it. And I'm like, That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's like saying I want to go play basketball and never miss a shot every time I play. And how long would you watch basketball if no one ever missed? Because here's the perfect way to do it. I'm like, no, I just think it's show up, let life teach you, and then just step forward, right? Like, so that's what I would say.
I guess to summarize an answer, it would be, I mean, it totally makes sense to say that you can't regret previous experience if it built you into a person that you are now, right? I'm sure we all have those moments, right? You wouldn't have known your weakness if you hadn't realized it was a weakness. So I guess to summarize, it would be just, which is kind of not the answer I want either, but it makes sense, is that, you just try your best, you see what works and reflect on the results and move forward, but not being afraid of the past, right? Like letting it guide the future, I suppose. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and a couple of just practical things, Dylan, things that I did, not things that I wish I had done differently, that I'm glad I did. Before I started the business, I knew that was going to place a heavier burden on my wife, Teresa. We had a very specific conversation of, are we going to go into this together? I think I need 2 years where you're going to be holding down the fort. We literally had that conversation. And what she said was, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun for me, but I know that that's what's right for you, and I'm willing to support you in that. And so that's one thing that I did. We had our monthly expenses and our savings at a point where it wasn't putting me, I believe it is really healthy to be hungry. I think that we make compromised decisions when we're starving. And so I had a situation where I had enough financial runway for a couple of years to figure that out. And so I didn't just go in totally blind on a lot of these things either. I did have that conversation with my wife. We did make sure certain financial things were in place, and that is what gave me the space to go for it. And so those are some things that I also did that I'm glad I did those things. And it's almost like we've actually gotten in the practice of once a year having that conversation with each other to say, what matters most to you this year moving forward, Teresa? What matters most to you, Jake? How are we going to prioritize and support each other in those things? Or where do we need to maybe not prioritize? What do we need to say no to? So I don't know if that's a couple of other things I would point out of things that I actually did do, and I'm glad I did them.
Hey, Jake, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
It's interesting, as you're going through that, you had a conversation with your wife right at the beginning saying, hey, I need 2 years, right? And I need you to hold down the fort. And so you kind of went into this with the partnership mentality.
Yeah.
Totally. And she said, yes, I'm willing to be your partner here. I'm willing to step up and fill in the gaps that you're not going to be able to fill because you're taking on this venture. Where do you feel like that separated? Because you went into this full on 100% partnership mentality. Where do you feel like that started to separate?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I've ever quite thought about it. These are my favorite conversations because there's not a predetermined destination. I think we all ebb and flow through these types of things. And so, but there's a couple of things that stand out to me immediately. The first one is I believe that there is a beautiful paradox of life, which is there's amount of being and there's amount of doing. And if you base your worth on what you do, you'll always be unsatisfied. But if you do nothing and you're just content to just be and zen out and do whatever, there's something lacking in that as well. It's this beautiful paradox of being versus doing. And I started to attach my identity to what I was doing. And rather than who I was, and that the doing was the experience it's always what you do always changes over time, right? So if you base your identity on something that's going to change, that identity always comes under threat. Rather than basing your worth in who I am and what I'm doing is the thing that will always change and giving me experiences and allowing me to live life, right? So over time, where it started to create that wedge, Cory, was I was giving myself to this business so much, reading so many books, working late hours, putting my all into these things. And when the wedge started to show up is, well, how come you're not reading as many books as I am? How come you're not as passionate about what you're doing as I'm passionate about what I'm doing at work? You know, and assuming that that should look the same for her. And so I actually started to be pretty judgmental in the relationship of, I think I'm growing faster than you are, and I you should come along and do it more like me. I think that's what started to create a lot of the wedge in the relationship, because I'm like, I'm so enthralled with this that it's like it almost felt like a letdown when I had to go back to family and marriage. And you know, it's interesting saying that out loud, but I would say that's kind of how it started to permeate into the relationship. Rather than me showing up like the partner, she showed up for me and saying, what are you passionate about and how can I support your ambitions now? Thanks for giving me some time. It's my turn to reciprocate, which we do now in the relationship. But it was, no, I'm the more important one in the relationship, so it's always your job to support. And why don't you do a little more while you're at it?
One more comment really fast, if I could. Just it's always the most interesting to me talking to successful people is, they always talk about reading books, right? What's your top 1, 2 that really felt like was worth your effort reading?
I would say there's a lot. I'll just say the first 2 that come to mind. So Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute is the book that we read in going through marriage counseling. Jim Farrell, who wrote it, just spoke at my conference a couple of months ago, and I've been helping him with his new business. So it's been fun to kind of go full circle with that. And then the other one that kind of helped me get back out of my head and into like more of like my being and in my heart was Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul, or Living from a Place of Surrender, was one that kind of cracked me back open spiritually a lot. Well, now where do we go, guys?
Yeah,
I think
so we're walking the timeline here. You've built this massive business. You've had, we'll call it a spiritual or a personal fall from grace, and you've built you've built all this back up, and now you're in this great place. So let's look back, because we got a lot of business owners, business builders in here. Like, what are the nuggets that you have to business builders and say, hey, this is one thing I do that increases my production?
Yeah. The first thing I would say, without a vision, the people perish. This has been a saying that existed for thousands of years. And I would say the first thing is, do you have something that you are excited to create and experience in this life? Because if you don't, it's hard to feel full of what I would call life force or energy, right? And the funny thing is, the thing that you think you want, the destination, is rarely what it actually is about. It's the experience of working towards that destination. It's, about the journey type thing. But if you don't have something that you're excited to get you going, I feel like it's easy to just fall into apathy and feel very dead inside. So that's the first thing is, do you have something that's like a strong why that you want to create or experience in life? Not because it will define your worthiness or measurement, or if you can get enough boxes checked off to make it into heaven or something like that. It's just because I just want to create it and experience it. That's enough of a reason, The second thing I would say is, does that exist in the relationship that matters most to you? If you don't have something you're excited to work towards together, that relationship will also perish. And then the third thing is, whoever you're working with, do you have shared vision in what you're building together? Because that's where, again, life it's like just this endless source of energy when you have personal clarity and vision, relationship clarity and vision, and work clarity and vision. And that's what just puts a lot of energy into what you're doing.
Now, one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs or people have is the fizzle out, where it is a project at first and it's a passion project and I love it and I'm all in, and then it doesn't happen in the first month, doesn't happen in the second month, and then I start to fizzle out. And you had talked about some of your energies, especially when you were grinding away at Disruptive, when some of your energies you were really putting into there. How did you, we say find your why. how do you reattach yourself to that and fuel your fire?
Yeah. The one of my favorite human beings is Einstein. I think he just had life pretty well understood and figured out. But one of the things that he said is you can't solve problems at the same level you created them. And so a lot of people are not consciously creating. They're actually running on like the programming that's already inside of them. So to go from something being a potential, it doesn't exist to be experienced yet. It's just an idea, it's a potential, right? The process of creating that is to have an intention or a desire, right? Like that's where it starts. There's an intention. And then that intention starts to turn into thoughts. And that's the first form of creation, is there's something inside of me that desires an experience, okay? And I think everyone has experiences in life to kind of understand what I'm saying there. There's just something coming out of you that wants to experience that. Well, then you start to have thoughts about it. And when you have thoughts enough, you start to believe those thoughts. And when you believe those thoughts, you start to feel emotions in relation to those beliefs. And those emotions lead you to start taking actions or behaviors towards the things that you believe. And then that's what actually creates the experience. So that is the creation process. And a lot of people say, I have a goal to get healthier. I have a goal to create a business. And where do they start? They start at, what behaviors do I need to change? And so when someone tries to solve life by starting at the behavior level or the action level, it doesn't work and it doesn't last, because it's not fed by a strong intention, or why is what we kind of just called that. So there's no energy flowing through into that creation. And then you say, well, how come I try this new exercise program and it doesn't work? How come I try this new business thing and it doesn't work? And then I get frustrated, disappointed, and then fall into my old patterns and habits, okay? And to me, this is like someone going to a river, and every time they drink from that river, they get sick. And then they keep going to the river and saying, why do I get sick every time I drink from this river, okay? And instead of going upstream to see what's going on, and they walk upstream 50 yards and there's a dead freaking cow in the river. And that's why they keep getting sick every time, because they have these beliefs that I'm not enough, or they have these thoughts that are spiraling around them all the time that they're not enough. And so their creation process is busted. There's a dead cow in the river, and all of the actions and the creation on the back end, they just keep drinking from the same water instead of going back up to the source in the spring where the water keeps coming up and it's fresh and it's clean and it fuels me, type thing.
Yeah,
And
we're talking symptoms versus problems, right? So many people,
Yeah.
and it's true in anything. It's true in like alcohol. It's true in pornography. It's like, hey, I need to stop watching pornography. Well, you probably have a disconnect somewhere else in your life that is driving you here. And the science on this is clear: neuroplasticity, affirmation. Do you have anything that keeps you into that growth mindset, that affirmation, rewire the brain, so once you think it long enough, you actually do believe it? Do you have any practices you do?
Yeah, so that's actually what I've built Disruptive University for.
Mhm.
So once a year, I go on a personal retreat, and I kind of just let go of all of the identities that I've been living and building and holding on to for the last year, and just give myself some time to breathe. And then I step back and I look at, what are the things that I got done this, like what's the progress I made in all these different areas of life this last year. And I just give myself the opportunity to see, like, look how far I've come. Look how much progress I actually have made. It's pretty cool. Okay. And then I go through the process of getting clear on what would feel great or what would give me a lot of energy to create this coming year. Okay. And then I go through mind, body, spirit, relationships, career, finance, impact and legacy, a lot of these types of things that I've defined as like these 8 areas of life to reflect on. And just like a funny little note, you know, those dream catchers that you can get from like Native American, it's actually the same thing. It's a dream catcher. You go through the process of exploring what could great look like in each of these 8 areas of my life. That's the dream. And then I kind of notice what my soul is like gravitating, what experience is it kind of calling to, right? And that becomes my one big thing for the year. And then what would need to be true for this to become a reality for an experience? And then I reverse engineer a little bit of that and say, okay, that's my focus for the year. And I do that in some areas of life, but there's always kind of like a big one. And then I actually have I've actually designed a journal where once a quarter, this is my one big thing. These are the 3 things that must be true in order for this to happen. Okay. And then on my daily, I get back to those things as well. And so I have like a system that I've been doing for years to create and keep myself aligned. And that's what I've built into Disruptive University that I've started sharing. I've just done that kind of internally in my companies for a while and started sharing that externally this last year.
No, that's brilliant. I'd love to compare notes with you sometime. I do a very,
Yeah.
very similar thing with my own personal journal that I create. So,
Cool.
we have a question from the chat here. Do you have any mentors at the beginning of your business journey that helped you or helped you succeed?
Absolutely. I think having a mentor that doesn't really have a dog in the fight is awesome. Anytime I tried to have, there's a level of support you can provide each other with the people that you work with, but when there's an inherent bias, it's a little tricky. And so I always had other business owners, associates, and was not afraid to pay for coaching or mentorship or go through programs or those types of things either. And I just am a big advocate of someone that's experiencing something aligned with what you want to experience. And I always have a mentor.
No, that's good. And speaking of programs, I mean, I think this is a perfect segue. And you'd mentioned the Disruptive University. So this is like the next side hustle or the next sister company. What is this, and what are the pillars that Disruptive stands on? Disruptive University, that is.
Yeah. So Disruptive University is a breakthrough company. I'm not really a hand holder. And so I like to give people the information, content, and experience that they need to have a breakthrough, but I'm not really the one to hold their hand beyond that point. Like I trust them to do that. And they can come back to the well if they want to explore what that looks like in other areas of life. But the foundational principles, the 3-legged stool that it all stands on is awareness, honesty, and responsibility.
Mhm.
And so all of the content and community efforts that we do are to generate awareness. Because if you're not aware of something, there's nothing to do about it. With awareness, we then practice honesty. And most of the time, we're not very honest with ourselves. And the reason why we're not honest with ourselves is because we're judging ourselves as good or bad or right or wrong, rather than just saying, there's no dog in the fight. What's just real? What's going on? And why do I keep doing this? I wouldn't keep doing this if there wasn't some sort of payoff. And so if I don't judge the payoff, can I just get real about why am I doing this? Okay. And in that example with my wife and going through counseling, the payoff to showing up that way was I don't have to change if I just blame her all the time. That's the payoff. At some point, that payoff doesn't feel very satisfying anymore.
Yeah.
And so if you don't judge it as good or bad, you just say, why do I behave this way? And then, oh, it's like, this is why. Does that serve me moving? And that's the last pillar, responsibility. Now that I'm aware, now that I'm honest, not judgmental, just honest with what's going on, then I ask myself, what would feel great moving forward? And does this serve me anymore? And that's the process, awareness, honesty, and responsibility. And that's where we explore that personally, in our relationships, and with our work. Those are the 3 areas that we practice awareness, honesty, and responsibility.
No, I've got no doubt this thing's going to be a success, and it's just awesome. I mean, it's a great spin on a lot of the things out there, but it's very, very personal, and the awareness thing is great. You know, you'd mentioned a really great thing about like when starting out, it's important to just be good at something, you know, and I'll often tell soldiers that like what the Army needs more than anything is you to be really good at your job, whatever your job is. And when your passion for that kind of fizzles out, you move to something else, but you got to be aware. You need to be aware of where your passion is and everything. And so I love that you have these little threads. I don't know if you realize you're doing that you tie throughout everything you say, and everything tends to be connected. From the chat, we got another one, and if anybody else has a question, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll.
And then Clint, just really
Yeah.
quick to what you just said, How do you know when you've gotten good at something and you're ready for the next adventure?
Oh,
To
that's not a question for me, is it? Like,
Well, I kind of tossed that out there, and I'd be curious your thoughts, because I think there is a saturation point where you kind of have gotten good at the thing and you're ready for the next thing. I think so often what people do is they never actually get to that point, and they
yeah.
keep trying lots of things and never getting there. So that kind of, I'd throw that out there. I'd be
Yeah,
curious
so-
what you or Cory have to say about that. Yeah.
So when I've evaluated my life and positions I've been in, I feel like I've been very fortunate to be put in positions where I could learn the job, be passionate about the job, to a point where you're going to get a promotion, you're going to move on. For me, if I start to settle back into the things I did in my last job, or the duties and responsibilities I was doing last year, that means my shelf life is probably up. If I find myself being in charge of the same event I was in charge of 5 years ago, that means I'm no longer stretching myself. I'm no longer pushing myself. I'm good enough at it. I can just comfortably do it year after year after year. At which point I got to figure out, okay, I need to delegate, or I need to move on. I need to do something else. And so as I've looked back, I'm like, I think I've done this exact same task for 8 years in a row, and I've been promoted 4 times. I'm probably doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it comes down to me on top of that, Clint, is when you start to feel like you're not challenged anymore, you have to have the bravery to like actually realize that and act on that, right? And that's a hard thing to do because people get comfortable in what they're doing. It's like, oh, I'm good at this, and so I can keep doing this, and I'm gonna continue to make this same money I'm making, and I'm gonna, you know, have the same recognition that I'm making, and that's good. That's good enough, right? But you're really robbing yourself if you're not challenging yourself and pushing yourself to be that better person. You're robbing yourself of the opportunities that could actually make you great.
This next question, I feel I'm going to say 95% of men have felt this. This comes from Caden. Uh, at the beginning, did you ever feel incapable, undeserving of success? He says, undeserving of building something successful without leaving your employment. Um, I know where this is going is so many men have felt undeserving, incapable, or anything like that. Have you ever? I mean, you're successful. Like you walk into a room, people know that you're successful. Have you ever felt that uh, undeserving or I can't do this type of mentality?
Every day of my life.
And what do you do to get past that?
I've just made friends with those thoughts and feelings. I think one of the things that keeps us stuck is thinking we can get those things to go away forever. I think there's a lot of power in accepting I will feel some level of doubt, unworthiness, not capable, on and off for the rest of my life. And I can accept that. I think that's where the power comes from. I think trying to not have those thoughts and feelings is what actually gives them power over you. And so I still have those thoughts or feelings every day.
What moves you to action though? Because so many people have those thoughts and feelings, and some people say, the hell with it, I'm going. And others will say, you're right. Why do you act?
Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do. Um, I really don't think life is about how many times can I get it right. I think it's just that we do our best every day. And some days my best just looks so different than other days. And some days that looks like pure success and nothing can stop me. And some days my best is like a weak sauce workout. Like there's still a few things that I just know that I do them regardless of how I feel. Because I know that that's what kind of keeps me grounded in a place to do that. And so like I have 3 core intentions every day of my life, which is I do things to fill my cup, I do things to deepen my relationships with people that matter most, and I build things with people that I love. And I just make sure that those three things happen every day, even if it's not a good day. Like, those are the things that I just do. And even if I don't feel like it, and even if I feel like a loser and giving up and want a third donut, like, I don't think it's about getting to perfect. And I think those days just keep happening. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredibly simple when you just break it down of if I'm going to do three things every day, and that'll at least move the needle or keep me right where I
Yeah.
need to be. Well, before we start to taper the end of this conversation, uh, where can everybody find you if they're looking for you on LinkedIn or they want to see awesome pictures of you on the internet? Like where can you be seen?
Yeah. The best way to connect is on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Jacob Baadsgaard. There's a lot of A's if you'll find me. And that's it. I regularly talk about and share things like this on LinkedIn.
Okay, and I want you to say one more thing. And I know I got people that are in the grind of starting business. If you can look down the pipe of the camera, tell them the one thing that's going to motivate them to keep going.
Hmm. Man, I feel like that's a good question that I'm even asking myself is, it's not an adventure until you don't know what's next. And on the other side of the thing you're avoiding is the treasure that's better than you even expected. Yeah.
Okay, just incredible, Jacob. So everybody, thanks for joining us. Remember, follow Jacob on all the socials, but he's most present on LinkedIn. You can always follow us at The Father Forge. Our main platform is Instagram or thefatherforge.com. Cory, why don't you take us out of here and let's spend the weekend with our kids, our family, and achieve that balance we're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a really, really heartfelt moment of gratitude for you, Jake. I know your time is extremely valuable. This was just an awesome meeting. I've loved everything you shared. I'm feeling pumped up. I'm feeling energized, and I know you've made an impact on the other guys on this call as well. And so I just wanted to, very from the bottom of my heart, say thank you for the time and energy and effort that you put into this, and just really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, anyone that gets to work with you, Cory, is lucky. I look up to you and respect you in so many ways. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks so much. See you on the next one.